the feeling of oneness with everything, that no matter what you see, what you experience, becomes a part of you and is you, that is 100%.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the channel Within. I am especially delighted today to have with me Lynn Russell, who has researched over 2,500 NDEs with Dr. Jeffrey Long on nderf.org, and who's had some spiritual awakenings herself, along with an NDE. Welcome, Lynn, and thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you very much for asking me. I'm looking forward to our chat.
The feeling is mutual. For those who are new to your work, could you share a little bit about your background and what first drew you to this area studying near death experiences?
Sure. Um, well, my background is that I was raised in an atheist home. No one in my family is religious at all. And so when I was about 8, my grandfather died. And so that made me think about death and that someday in the future I would die. And so I was very frightened. I didn't want to die. And I wanted to know what was going to happen. And, very insecure about that one. So I asked my mother, who is an atheist, and so she said, nothing, you just disappear. And I was a little kid. I didn't want to disappear. So I wasn't very happy with that information. And so that made me curious about religions, because in those days, we're going back to the 40s. And in those days, there just wasn't anything but religions. There was none of this open spirituality that we have today. And that is the open spirituality is thanks to the boomers that did that. The boomers were the ones that brought that in. But anyway, so I did go to some churches around. I went to Salvation Army, and I went to United, and the Presbyterian. Yeah, just different ones to find out if they knew what was going to happen. And none of them did. Salvation Army, I tried that too. But none of them had the answers. And so when I was in my mid-teens, I really got into it. And that's over 70 years ago now. And so I started reading, and I just fell in love with learning about it. And I was fascinated with what if they had any answers. But I also wanted to know the history and how did it evolve and how did it become like it is today. So that was a part of it. I decided later, like as I learned and grew, I decided I wanted to know what truth was, whatever. And wherever that took me, that's where I was going. And so when the 70s, when the whole spirituality opened up, I was very happy to get involved with that kind of thinking. And so that really helped me.
I'm curious about what books you read.
Well, back then, when I started reading, I read a lot of Joel Goldsmith, plus, and together with the Course of Miracles. When I was reading both of those together, that's when I had the first aha of the oneness, and that we're all one. And that came from those two books, reading them together, and that started to make sense. So that was where I got.
So, what about the NDE and the three spiritual transformative experiences that you had? Can we
Yeah.
talk about those?
Well, I did have an NDE, but I almost embarrassed to talk about it because it was next to nothing. What happened was that I was very sick in bed, and and I was running a high fever, and uh, and I knew I was going to die, and I had told people that I was going to die, and I went to the hospital, and they said, "Oh, it's just the flu. Go home." And so, so I'm in bed, and I'm really sick. So all of a sudden, I'm in this tunnel with a man, and but there was no. That's why I questioned, like I knew I was dead, but I questioned whether I had a true NDE or not because I I didn't feel the warmth. I didn't feel any comfort. I felt confusion. What was this? What was going on? And who was this man that was with me? But and he was one of my guides. I know that now. But back then I didn't know who he was. And um, and so we're going up this very gray, that just gray, smoky gray, a tunnel. We're going up this tunnel, and I could see a pinprick of light, but that was about it. And then we heard this big booming voice come down and say, "Take her back. It's not her time." And my guide said, "But she died." And the voice said, "Take her back. She has much left to do." So here I am, and still a lot of years later. That was in 1972. And in 1973, I had three STEs. Um, and so the first one, I was doing dishes, and I had three children. I was a single parent, and the two older children were at school, and the youngest one was having an afternoon nap. So the place was quiet, and and all three events happened during that same time when the house was quiet. And anyway, I'm doing up the lunch dishes, and above the sink is the window, and I'm looking out, and there's an apple tree out there. And this is spring, and the apple tree is in blossom, and it's really very beautiful. So I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden, I became the apple tree. I was the tree. There was no separation at all. And and I became the bird in the tree, and I became the bug the bird was going to eat. I became every kind of life form, whether it was vegetable or animal, it didn't matter. I became it. And it just was really cool, you know. And that only lasted maybe 30 seconds. But the one thing people have asked me is, what did I feel? I felt as the tree. The tree felt great joy at being existent in alive, or being, to simply be. That tree was just so filled with joy. That was the end of the experience. I came back to myself, and I was still at the sink doing dishes, and as I say, it was maybe less than a minute. um,
That is so wonderful to hear because in one of my walks that I do, I go under a canopy of trees and I love the energy and hearing that when you became the tree that you felt joyous is just so beautiful to hear. Was it overwhelming when you became one with everything?
No, because I had read about it. I hadn't read the book Cosmic Consciousness, but I had read about people becoming together with, and so when I had the experience, I sort of was like, "Oh, this is cool," you know. So that was about all. And then the next experience was a few days later, And this time I'm wiping fingerprints off the whole wall, um, and whatever. And all of a sudden, I don't see the wall anymore. I'm seeing an atom with the nuclei and the electrons going around. Then I see our solar system with the sun and the planets going around. And then I see a galaxy. And so the nuclei of the galaxy and all the planets and, suns and whatever going around. Anyway, so it was like from the micro to the macro universe. And while I'm seeing this expansion, I'm getting messages. And the messages said, this didn't just happen by itself. There was order and planning and an intelligence behind it. And, when I was hearing that, I was thinking, yeah, that's cool. I believe that. That sounds right. But then I got a message I did not like at all. And it said that my being, and this is verbatim, my being, your being, is an intricate part of the universe. And I didn't like that at all because I didn't understand it. I didn't know about oneness. And so I didn't understand it all. And I thought that how could I be anything bigger than a speck of dust when I'm talking about the whole universe? So, I rejected that because it sounded too much responsibility. I couldn't take it that much responsibility, so I just rejected it. And that was the end of that experience. It stopped. Then a few days later, now I'm in the living room and I'm picking up toys. And so nobody's in my room. And it's a big living room, quite large. And all of a sudden, there was a presence in the room with me. I knew there was something there. I couldn't see anything. All I saw was the room, but I could feel this huge amount of love and the presence itself. And this like a wave of love just permeating me and penetrating and just beautiful. And then I felt as if I was connected somehow to this entity, whatever. And then I heard words in my ear, verbal words. And the words said, this is where you came from, and this is where you will return. And before that, I had started this whole thing because I was terrified of death. But by the time that, with that message, that took care of my fear of death, because if that's where I came from and that's where I was going back, it was like when, So yeah, that was and I nothing bothered me. I had 3 kids and they were 1 year apart. So my oldest one was only 2 years and 2 months apart, older than the baby. And so I was very busy. But their noises and their shenanigans, nothing bothered me. they could have crashed the house and it would have been okay, have fun.
Thank you so much for sharing those experiences. As far as the NDE, I'm so glad you came back to do all this amazing work.
Oh, I had another experience. I was in my office, but I'd gone back to school, upgraded, and now I was a family counselor. And so I'm in my office and writing a report on the family. And I heard these words very, very clearly. It was the same as that one, that this is where you came from, same kind of voice. And it said, I want to use you. And that scared me again. And I thought, what do you want me for? Why? What do you want me to do? There was nobody around. I was all by myself. And I knew where the voice came from, but I refused to accept it So I got up and looked around out in the hall, to make sure. Anyway, um, and I didn't get any answers back. I was like, what do you want me for? What am I supposed to do? Because I was sure I was going to mess it up. Anyway, so um, nothing happens. I ran around to different psychics and people like that to see if they knew they could pick up messages, if they could tell me what I was supposed to do, but they couldn't. And so anyway, and so I was that was really exciting, but I left it. I just dropped it. I just thought, oh, it's just my own mind. I'm just talking, and so I dismissed it. And then I got another message, and this time it was 4 years later. 4 years. And this message, I'm in a restaurant with my daughter and her friend, and they're teenagers, 14 years old, and this is the youngest one. And so I'm in there with them, and the voice comes back. And it said, I still want to use you. And that's verbatim. And I said, okay, fine. And I had nothing left to give. I had just been through nightmare. My house had burned down, and I just had a lot of things happen, and I was dealing with three teenagers, and my mom had died. So I really didn't, I didn't think I was ready. But it said, "Don't worry, I'm preparing you now," and that was the end.
In studying over 2,500 NDEs, what stands out to you most about what people experience on the other side? What are the common themes that you've seen?
Okay, there are actually, okay, so let me start by saying no two death experiences are alike, or
Mhm.
NDEs are alike. They are as individual as we are from each other. And so that's one of the important points. That's a very important point because we are the creators of that. And just in the exact same way as we are the creators of this life that we're having. Okay, so that's one point. But there are just the same as we as humans have similar things. We all walk, we talk, we eat, we sleep. All of those things are similar. Well, and ears have the same kind of thing where they have similarities of across the board that everybody has, and so that's you've heard most of you that are into NDEs have heard them, and there are things like uh, being able to travel by thought, telepathic, and they can see us and hear us here on the earth, and they know what people are thinking and experiencing. Um, they see their guides or their loved ones, um, or both, and so there's quite a list. There's a list of about 30. I think there might be a little bit over 30 points. Um, and I have them in my book, Beyond NDEs, uh, the next step in near-death experience research. And I have all of them in there, but it's such a huge list that I can't list them all here. But the feeling of oneness is 100%. And that is probably that to me is astounding because the other ones are 90%, 80, 99%, that kind of thing. They're not always 100%, but the feeling of oneness with everything that no matter what you see, what you experience becomes a part of you and is you, that is 100%. And one of the things that I've realized with that with that point is the I'm a very firm believer in that we are all one. And I think that's what that cosmic consciousness that I have, that those experiences I had, I think that's what they were talking about. And I think that NDEs are talking about it, like there's a lot of people talking about oneness. And the oneness means there is one soul, one spirit, and that we are all it. That's it. We are all it. And so is the um, inanimate parts of the universe, the rocks and the planets and the black holes. They're all part of the same oneness. Two things I wanted to stress is that number one, that love that the NDErs feel that are just so overwhelming, that's them. They're feeling their own love. That is their love as source. And that's they're feeling themselves.
I love hearing that the love that you feel is from you.
Because there's only one, and we the oneness are creating this experience, then it's the same. That love is ours too. And I'll tell you how it works. And this isn't in the book, by the way. It was an aha that I had 2 or 3 ahas after that book was published. So this is what I came up with. First of all, we know that source is 3 things. We know 3 things about it. And I'm talking about it as if it's separate. And I apologize to myself and and to all the people. Anyway, but one of the things we know is high intelligence beyond anything we can even conceive at this physical level. We also know that it has consciousness, that it communicates. Okay, it communicates with, well, it's communicated with me, and many other people, but it also communicates with NDEs when they're on the other side. And it also is love. And love is not a feeling. Love is the essence of that being. The source, the soul of source is love. Okay, so whatever it does, love is part of it because that is it. So here's how I see this whole thing happening. And I take it farther. First of all, if you imagine source being in nothingness, there was just nothing. And if we had a source that had the qualities that I've just listed, that would drive it nuts, to be this intelligence that's creative and it just couldn't possibly live without creation. So creation is just comes together with source. But how source creates is through consciousness, okay, and through its intelligence. And so it's creating all the time, constantly, like a flood that just keeps flooding and flooding perpetually. So, all right, so this universe, that the universal consciousness that people talk about, that consciousness is source consciousness. And that source consciousness is filled with love because it can't be otherwise. And this will be in my next book. What's happened is that energy, that source energy, that love energy, actually, is what it is. We see it as energy. We don't see anything else. We know it as energy. And we know it as energy that we call particles, because we can use that energy in certain ways. And we know that every single atom in the world is made up of particles. And every single thing in the world is made up of atoms. So, in fact, everything in the universe is made of atoms. Um, and so there we have the consciousness, the love, um, and entering it is the particles that are used, and it becomes the atoms, and those atoms become us in our cells. Every single one of our cells is filled with those atoms and those particles, which are also all filled with love. And so we are love, and we don't see it because we're so wrapped up in seeing ourselves as
Separate.
separate, yes, and human. And we do want to we do want to be human because being human is important. We give of our experience, we give back to source, which is ourself. So that's a circle that we give. But in that, we don't have to destroy. We don't have to be the kind of human we are. We can know. We can love each other. We can do, we can be kinder.
I really love that analogy because I also try to think that source exists, permeates the entire universe. And so there is no place that it is not. And your analogy, source, the consciousness to the particles, really drove that home for me.
Because the consciousness is in everything, everywhere.
One of the things I find fascinating is a life review that occurs on the other side. And can we talk about this a little bit more? You know, seeing the review from our point of view, when the near death experiences from their point of view, as well as from other points of view too, with people that they're interacting with.
Well, one of the main points of the life review is, and it's actually the only point, is how we are with each other. And so that's that is the bottom line. And so if we treat others, when we have the life review, we see and feel everything, not only our own feelings, but the feelings of those that we interacted with. And so if we're doing something, kindness, then we feel that person's kindness. But we all, that their happiness, their joy that they get from our kindness. And they also feel how that spreads out and I call it an echo. It's like it just keeps going and going. And they feel all of that until it, dissipates. And so it's the same with negative behavior. And so we feel the negative things that we've done to others too. And that includes decisions and includes things like cutting people off in traffic. I mean, we don't even think about those things, but there's another person there, you know? And so those are the kinds of things, yes, our thoughts are vastly important. I mean, we just don't realize how important our thoughts are. And so that's where it all comes from, is that the we experience everything that we do with other people, including our decisions and how it will affect others. One of the things that I want to mention, though, is if your intentions are positive, but it worked out horrible, it wasn't, that is not going to be something that you will feel bad about because your intentions, it's the intentions that are the most important point.
That's good to know. Many who experienced NDEs come back transformed. They don't sweat the small stuff. They lose their fear of death. They live with greater compassion and they value love above everything. How might those of us who have not had those kinds of experiences live in that same light?
Because of the life review and because of the knowledge that, because that's one of the things that I told you there was, I call them universal elements because they're things that happen to everybody. And so one of them is understanding and knowledge of everything. But that's because we are source and we are creating everything. So of course we know it. When we get, when we drop this veil that we have here, then we open up. And so they come back understanding with a much deeper understanding. And so yes, that then they really care about the world. And I think NDEs and STEs are changing the world because there is so much happening. Yeah. Another thing I think is that the world is going to be a whole 5 years, only 5 years from now. So prepare. 5 years from now, it's going to be a whole different world because the boomers are reaching they're dying off. They're going to start dying. And they're reaching 80 pretty soon. And certainly in that 5 years, they will. And so they're going to be leaving this world and going back to the source. And so what's behind it are the millennials. Those are the ones that are going to be taking over. And so it's the millennials that really have to prepare themselves for what kind of world they want to build and do it now because 5 years is not very long.
Is there one near that experience that stayed with you more than any others that touched you?
Yeah, there's a few. The one that I like the most, I just love, is well, there's two actually. One is the lady's called, it's HAFUR, and she's on NDER, and she's just a normal, ordinary housewife, and she dies. I don't know what happened. I can't remember how she died, but she is wonderful, just marvelous. The knowledge that she gained, she just comes back, and she's very articulate, and she is very point form, this and this and this, and very clear, and talks about what I'm talking about. So, yeah, but that one I really liked because she was just an ordinary person who came back with all this knowledge. So she wasn't somebody who'd studied it for years and years, you know. The other one is a man by the name of Mellon Thomas Benedict. And Mellon is Mellen and dash Thomas. And he's not on NDER, but he's online. And so you could just Google his name. And also his experience is Kevin Williams' site. It's neardeathexperience.com. His experience is on there. So anyway, Mellon Thomas had cancer, and he died of cancer. But before that, he hated people. He thought people were the they were just horrible. They were evil, and they were evil, and so he just didn't like them. He kept away, quite cranky. Anyway, so he's dying of cancer, and he's going up into wherever. And I don't know if he had a tunnel or not, but he just says that he was moving up and going. And he said, he just calls out, wait a minute, I stop. And everything stopped. And I love that because that says we have a lot more control than we think we do. Anyway, I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, so he says, I want to think about this. And then he says, all right, take me to the very beginning. And he goes to the very beginning and he experiences creation, and he becomes the light, and he becomes the source, and he sees himself creating with the source. But He loses many people who go into the light and become the light, lose contact. They know that they were that person, but it's they're not that person now. They just lose it, their identity. I think, they identify more with being the light than with being the person. Anyway, so that's what happens to him. And so he has to come back. And as he's coming back, he meets up with his guides on the way back. And he says to the guides, like he comes back. I mean, like he has cancer, but it's cured. And so he comes back. So anyway, he says to his guide, so there's no evil people? And the guide says, there are no evil souls anywhere. And it's then the guy, and I wish I could remember the words, but it's what you think is what you become. And so you have to be very careful of the thoughts.
That is a great reminder. And I like when you talk about we lose our identity when we cross over. It is, I like the analogy of us being stage actors here. And then when the curtain is closed, we take our bows and we revert to a real self, which is not that stage actor. And that is where that is analogous to losing the identity, because if we have had so many lives, we are, merely playing in this lifetime.
Yeah, one of the things um, about people who have death experiences is that they recognize all the other lifetimes they've had.
And is it true that it is where the lifetimes are seen as a tapestry of lives, where past lives are happening simultaneously with future lives and the present life, and they're all affecting each lifetime? Is that correct, Lynn?
Oh yes. Well, yes, I think you bring the knowledge from that, the knowledge that you gained from that lifetime, you bring it to the next one.
Okay.
And
And
also, if you haven't completed the task that you came here to do, then you will have to still do that. So you would have almost a similar life as the one you're having because you need to finish your task. That's that task is paramount, very, very important.
and free will comes into play, and so we get another chance, right?
Oh yeah, it's free will. There's so many. I fight against this, and I, I should just leave it alone. But anyway, nothing is meant to be. Nothing is meant to be. There is accidents. They happen all the time, and that's okay because what I see Source doing, or in the creation, is putting all this energy out there and say, go ahead, have fun, do whatever you want. And it's up to us. And the only contract, as I say, is that we have promised to do certain things while we're here. And that's it.
In your view, what does death teach us about how to truly live?
Well, I think that teaches us a reality. Um, I haven't had that question before, so I have to do a little thinking. Gee whiz. Anyway, yes, I think death is just teaches us a reality, but it also teaches us um, we learn and grow back to the source, because I think that when we our first break away, if I use that analogy, I hate it, but because we never break away. We're always connected to source, but it's the consciousness that breaks away. So when we think that we're human or we think that we're separate, we don't realize the importance and we have to grow back to the source. And that is the bottom line, is growing back. And that's all the lessons and all the lifetimes and what you bring with you. That's the lessons that you learn that bring you back to source.
How do you think the NDEs are helping to shape spirituality?
Well, I think the numbers. I mean, there are just so many, many, and NDEs are being created right. I mean, every minute of every day, actually, because the wars and the different atrocities and things that are happening. And one of the things that I want to point out is that we hear about these awful, awful things, but once we're dead, that's it. We don't feel a thing. It doesn't matter how we die. Once we're dead, that's it. And if it's too atrocious, we leave our body. Before, one of the things I meant to mention this a couple of times, and I keep forgetting. So anyway, one of the things is that when the person is on the other side, and even after they come back, everything is forgiven. If your loved one died and you and that person had issues that were unresolved, well, for them, it's resolved. They don't carry it on. It's only still with you.
Thank you very much, because that was one of my questions as well. What
Okay.
about pets, and are there NDEs in with other planets and other life forms?
Well, there are a number of NDEs that do that. Um, and so some people will do that a lot, but to go to other planets and other life forms is not very common.
Okay. And in crossing over, in addition to meeting loved ones sometimes, because not every time it appears as if we are accompanied by a loved one, but do we meet our pets as well? Yeah.
Yes, 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 absolutely.
That's good to know. Is there a correlation between belief and experience? Say, Christians meet Christ, not necessarily, right? Because I've seen atheists that have met Christ. So, how does that work?
I think generally the general theme is that Christians will meet Jesus and Muslims will meet Muhammad and so forth. Um, but but that you're right. Jews meet Christ, or or Buddhists. It's just there's no and one of the things that people ask is what's the right, correct religion, and and the correct religion is whatever you believe. It doesn't matter. There isn't, as long as it brings you closer to source and doesn't separate or harm or advocate harm for others.
Beautifully said, Lynn. How has your own relationship with death and the divine or source evolved over the years?
Big time, because I said I used to be terrified. Um, and but I've become very warm. But I also am psychic. I get messages about things like silly things that wouldn't matter to anybody else. Like, for example, when I saw a man standing on the my daughter's lawn with a bunch of other people, I got a message saying Gwen's husband, and that was going to be her future husband. And it was true. And so things like that. I had a daughter who died, and and nobody knew when she was going to die because they can't tell you the date. And I got a message saying she's going to die on the 19th of December. And so it's almost 10 years now. Then on the 19th of this month. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that I hear. And so yeah, I love it, but it keeps me in contact and it helps me to know. And because of the experiences I've had, it helps me to know that this isn't just a made up thing. It's not it's real.
My
For me.
condolences on the death of your daughter. Um,
So it's comforting.
yes, yes. In terms of time, since you we talked about time a little bit, it seems like there is no time once we transcend this earth, and so we while we record it sequentially or on a linear basis, it seems like when explaining what happened to them, the near death experiences will say it's a hard to put into context, and so they describe it linearly for us to understand, and also that there is no time happening out there, right?
Yes, yes. Time is essential at the physical level because we need that space to change and grow and be whatever, and to experience. And so, yeah, we need time, but there's only one source. There's only oneness. And so, how can there be time inside of one being?
I asked three questions at the end, Lynn. What brings you laughter and joy these days?
Oh, oh, my goodness. I just love life. I love being alive. I love being able to do this. I don't care about the money. I wish I could get my word out more, you know, but it isn't because I want to sell books. It's because I want to help people to get what I'm talking about, and that's the most important thing for me is is to the message. The most important message for me is to help people know how magnificent they are.
What would you whisper to Lynn, who is now beginning her journey?
Yes, that's a good question. Uh, I would tell little Lynn to love herself and to trust, to trust. I think that trust is the big word because I was raised, I was assessed when I was 7 as mentally slow, and I do have learning disabilities, and I've demonstrated them here because I'm ADD. I'm not hyper, but I'm ADD, and my mind goes boing boing boing, and I have to grab a hold of it and bring it back to what we're talking about, um, and that can be a problem. And so, but that's one. And of course, in the 40s, they didn't even know about ADHD or ADD. Another thing, I'm dyslexic, so I can't, and I couldn't read out loud. If they told me to read out loud, I would just make a mess. And so I was assessed as mentally slow and put in classes for kids who were mentally slow. And I didn't find out that I was above average in intelligence until I was 31. Thus, the separation and the 3 kids.
If there was one final blessing you'd like to leave for everyone listening, what would it be?
How wonderful you are. Know that you are source. It isn't a dream. It isn't a fairy. It's reality. And and as source, you are magnificent. And as that conscious love energy that is in every one of your cells, you are love. So how can you not be magnificent?
Thank you very much, Lynn. How can people find you?
Oh, well, you can Google my name, Lynn K. Russell. Don't forget the K because there are a bazillion Lynn Russells. It's a very popular name. So, so Lynn K. Russell, and so just Google it, and there's all kinds of links. You can go to my website, lynnKrussell.com, and you can also watch me on YouTube. the I think it's Lynn K. Russell channel.
Thank you so much for doing all this amazing work
Oh, you're
and for
welcome.
helping raise consciousness in this way. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. I'm happy that you're here.